A simple subject to draw, such as this church, can be a great learning experience, but it also presents some particular challenges. Let me talk you through now some of the strategies I have for overcoming these challenges as we come across them with this simple Georgian church from the Tasmanian town of Bothwell. Firstly, a simple subject, almost by definition, is going to have simple lines. So the focus of our drawing, the focus of our scene when we look at it is quite narrow. There's not a lot of detail to get immersed in or to wander around. And therefore, because we have a more contained focus, we need to make sure that what's there we get right, that we get it correct. So in a scene such as this, particularly, we want to make sure we get the proportions correct. And particularly as we start and we're establishing the proportions and the scale for our whole drawing. So by proportions, I mean the relationship between the height to the width. That is, something's a square, we draw it as a square. If it's a almost square, we draw an almost square. And if it's an obvious rectangle, we draw an obvious rectangle. So we get our proportions correct. It's also important that we get any symmetry correct. That with the detail that there is, if it's balanced on right and left or up and down, that we get that balance correct. So for instance, if this round clock is in the centre of that upper section of the tower, that we get it correct. Those castellations we have at the very top of our tower, that we get the middle one of those in the middle and the two on each side equally spaced. And that the gaps are narrower than the bits between the gaps. So this is what I mean by proportions and symmetry. We have the buttresses down below, sort of from door level down, to get those balanced in symmetry, to get the angles correct on each side, but simply reversed. We have that angle that comes off the tower on each side, the roof of the aisles in the church. We want that angle to be the same, but one to the left, one to the right. If we don't get these details correct, it's going to really stand out obviously, because there's not a great deal of detail to distract us. The door needs to be centered, and it mustn't come up any more or less with regard to the rest of the building than it does in our reference. And when we have a relatively simple subject, our edges become even more important. In a scene such as this, where we have fairly smooth edges, smooth, straight edges, then we want nice, clean lines. We don't want fuzzy, fluffy, feathered lines or multiple lines if we can at all help it. And particularly because our subject is in the sun, it helps make the edges even sharper. There are no shadows to create slight disturbances for that. Now, secondly, when we have a fairly simple subject, we need to get the visual balance right in our drawing. And by visual balance, it's not really a phrase I've used before. What I mean is that when we look at our reference, what's obvious in our reference is obvious in our drawing. The difference between where there's light and dark or detail and not detail is fairly similar. Now, in this particular case, the challenge is going to be with the sandstone blocks. When we look at our reference, by far the overwhelming impact is the outline, are the large shapes of the building. So we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose the fact that what we see is primarily the overall shape, and yet we don't want to not draw any of the, if you like, texture of the sandstone blocks. We don't want to make it we don't want to give the impression that this is a smooth cement rendered building. And yet what we want to avoid is a technique for the stones, for the stonework, where at the end, because there are simply so many lines to define the rows of stone and the blocks of stone, that the overwhelming visual impact is of stones, of stonework, where that becomes the primary thing that we see, even ahead of the relatively simple shape of the church. And if you're finding this interesting and helpful, please remember to hit the like button and even to subscribe if you're new to my channel as well. Now, simple can also, if we're not careful, be boring. Simple can be stylish, but simple can also be a bit uninteresting. And so when we have a simple subject, such as the architectural lines of this church, the question is, what else is there that we can use, that we can do, that we can even tweak if we want, or even add? We're not bound by the photo by any means. One of the advantages of being artists is that we can add or subtract things that are in the photo for the sake of our drawing. So what else is there in our reference? And of course, what we have in this scene of this particular church is foliage. We have wonderful foliage. We have at least 5 different types of foliage. We can see 5 different types of trees and plants. We have the hedge in the front. We have the tall, thin pines in the back, 2 on each side. We have a dark pine or fir on the extreme right, and we have 2 very different firs or pines on the left-hand side. And we have some sort of less defined vegetation that we can see on the extreme left as well. So we actually have 6 different spots of vegetation. And so this is where we can really exploit this by using different marks and different values to create interest, to add interest. And so the challenge is going to be, how can I capture what I'm seeing in the reference about these trees? This video could really have been about drawing different types of trees or using marks for different types of trees. So if trees are a problem, this is a great drawing to draw because there is such great practice at a wide variety of marks. And in case you don't know, this reference photo is on my channel community page. So you can go there and take a screenshot and print it off and use it as a reference for your own drawing. Or if you'd like to just draw from the screen, you can just draw from the community page. But these are all my photos, and so there's no copyright. I'm giving you all permission to use these photos for your own drawing learning experience. So why not have a go yourself, and particularly see this as a challenge to capture the different vegetation, the different foliage, the different leaves and the way they're attached and grouped on the branches. It's a great example for that. Now, the foliage also creates this wonderful framing effect of the church that comes around on 3 sides. The other element we have to play in this is the shadows that we see. Now, we don't really see any shade because the sun is fully on this church in this angle. We can't see the parts of the church that are shaded because of the position of the sun and the rest of the building. But we do see some shadow where parts of the building cast a shadow on other parts of the building. Not a great deal, just really under the roof lines and to the left of the tower and that thin ledge that runs around the top just under the castellations. We also have some shadow cast from some trees that we can't actually see down the very lower section. So manipulating the values that we create with our hatching is another way we can add interest to our church, but also another way we can help to define the church. We can help make it clearer what the lines are and create a sense of visual drama. Whenever we have bright sunny days, the best way to try and capture that bright sunshine effect is to have a fairly high contrast between the lightest lights and the darkest darks, and where possible, have them next to each other as much as possible. And in this case, it's the paper of the stone bricks on the tower and the shadow that's cast to the left. Now, we also have a very strong contrast between the black clock, but in this case, the black is coming from the local colour, from the actual colour of that object in the reference. It's not connected with the sun at all. If anything, it's a little pale, a little washed out because of all the sun. And you can just see the marks I'm making now for the most extreme of these foliage specimens that I've had to draw. It's really important with this to look hard and to think what lines will capture the effect. I'm not trying to draw detail here with these trees. I'm trying to capture the effect of the foliage, the effect of the way that the leaves or the needles hang, the way they're grouped, how many are together, sometimes how the overall clusters of groupings of leaves, what sort of canopy it forms, one thick, dense one, or lots of less dense ones that we can see between, or sometimes we can see through. It's trying to see that and then working out what marks can I make that will indicate that. And that's it. Here's our simple Georgian church. Simple, but still lots to think about when we draw it. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you found this interesting, and I really do hope you give it a go, because in some ways the simplicity of the structure itself, while still presenting the challenges that we've talked about, does give more time to consider some of the other elements, such as the framing of the church by all of these various types of foliage, and playing with the values that we create with our hatching and the direction of our hatching lines. So why not give it a go? But look, whatever you draw and however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.